I talked to you guys right after the Ja Morant injury. I said that the Grizzlies were not a better team without Ja, but they were a different team. With Ja Morant on the floor, it's very heliocentric. It's very him at the top of the key making every decision. So obviously it impacts other players' rhythm on the floor. And then secondly, Ja Morant is the worst defensive player on this roster, or at least in the rotation by a long shot. Tyus Jones, who's, not a fantastic defensive player, is a much better defensive player than Ja. And so when you pump all of those Ja minutes out of the lineup and you replace them with a little bit more Tyus Jones and a little bit more size and athleticism, you get a much better defensive team. This season, when Ja was off the floor, the Grizzlies were about 5 points better per 100 possessions on the defensive end of the floor. They actually were better in their overall net rating with Ja off the floor. And again, it's not because Ja is, hurting the team or the team is better without him, but in the small sample sizes that they went without him, actually it wasn't even that small. They played 25 games, I think, without him this year. But in those games, they played a different brand of basketball. It was more of bruising, more physical, more defensive oriented. And they ran through a lot of teams this year, a lot of good teams. We saw that Brooklyn Nets team with KD and Kyrie walk into Memphis without Ja and get beat towards the end of the season. They're a really, really difficult team to deal with. They were already one of the biggest and most athletic teams in the league with Ja. Taking him out of the lineup and putting another bigger player in there was inevitably going to cause that type of curveball. That increased defensive pressure completely threw Golden State out of whack. In that first half, Jordan Poole and Steph only played 30 of 48 available minutes. Obviously, if both players played the full half, they could have played 48 minutes. They only played 30. I thought that was a direct reaction from Mike Brown to the increase in size and them struggling with the physicality. They played Klay Thompson 21 first half minutes, which, again, even if you are trying to fight the size, I wouldn't have done that. But again, Mike Brown's getting tossed into the fire there. He hasn't been coaching the team all season. He's just thrown into that spot. So obviously it's tough to hold him super accountable for that. But I thought that was an interesting reaction to Memphis coming with a ton of size. You saw it directly affect their shooting. We talked about how in game 2, the Warriors stars shot horrible. Steph shot horrible. Klay shot horrible. Jordan Poole shot horrible. Andrew Wiggins shot horrible. Then they all got going in game 3. Well, this curveball from Memphis threw them all out of whack again. In the first half, Jordan Poole, Steph, Andrew Wiggins, and Klay Thompson were 1 for 17 from 3. 1 for 17. And there were some good looks in there, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it was you could just tell they were thrown off by the whole rhythm of the game and the way that it changed. They had 11 first half turnovers, which led to 9 points for the Grizzlies. That's, sloppiness and them struggling with some of the length and athleticism that was on the floor. I thought it was a really, really interesting decision to go back to Steven Adams in the lineup from Taylor Jenkins. He has been completely removed from the rotation in this playoff run. Obviously, we saw him play, I think, 3 minutes in game 2 of the Minnesota series before he basically disappeared. He only played 6 minutes total in games 1 through 3. Well, they played him 27 minutes tonight. 15 rebounds, 6 offensive rebounds. It was plus 11. Just a dominant performance from Steven Adams coming in off the bench in that big guy role. That's the interesting thing about what Taylor Jenkins did in this specific scenario. Do you guys remember how I was super critical of Doc Rivers for the way that he went about games 1 and 2 in that Miami Philly series? I told you guys I thought that they could never hope to play their same style against Miami without Joel Embiid and win. There's never a chance because at that point it's the loss of talent. So I thought it was a terrible idea to go rolling into Miami with your centers, with DeAndre Jordan on the floor, with Paul Reed on the floor, and try to play traditional, conventional basketball against a team that just has more talent than you. I thought that was a really poor decision. I thought their best opportunity to win down in Miami was to go crazy and weird. Because in a small sample size, weird can work. And tonight's a great example of that. When Philly went with all guards and wings, they had a ton of success down there in Miami because it's just weird. Guys don't know where to stand. Guys, perimeter, guards that are typically guarding, perimeter players suddenly are, dealing with a bigger wing in the post. You'll have big guys that are traditionally hanging around the basket, having to chase a shooter around or having to cover a ton of ground in rotation. It throws everybody off. But instead, Doc Rivers went conventional and got his butt kicked. I thought it was really interesting that Taylor Jenkins was like, no, I'm going to go weird. I'm going to go huge. I'm going to play Steven Adams, even though I haven't been able to play him at all in this entire playoff run. We're just going to physically maul Golden State in this game. And that was their best chance to muck things up and get that going the way that they did. To Golden State's credit, they battled back. And a lot of that credit I give to Steph. In that game in particular, as a result of the way that the things got tight, sweaty palms, lots of pressure. You're down by 8 to 10 points in the second half. I think they were actually down by 11 at one point. A lot of guys start pressing. You saw that from like Klay Thompson. It was just like, quick shots in transition, quick, tough shots around the rim, over penetrating when you're attacking a closeout. Jordan Poole was so good in game 3 as an initial dribble drive creator, getting that like first step on somebody to get into the lane. But because everyone was shooting poorly, guys were playing off of Jordan Poole. Like Jordan Poole would start to kind of mix up with his rhythm dribbles as he's getting ready to attack, and the defender's backpedaling. And it's hard because do you take a quick pull-up three at the early in the possession when your team's not shooting particularly well? Like it gets in your head a little bit. It becomes complicated. And you could tell that was disrupting a lot of what they were doing. And to Steph's credit, he just came into that fourth quarter and was like, I need to make some plays. And he made some plays, got to the rim. I thought it was really smart that he started punishing Steven Adams. Like, again, like we talk a lot about how styles make fights. It's not that, I'm a big believer in small ball. That's why I'm a big believer in this Warriors team. But regardless of if a small ball team plays against a big team, the small ball team's not guaranteed to win. The small ball team has to do small ball things really well. Look at so for instance, I always talk about the give and take of going small. If a team goes big, you can expect that, and you're small, you can expect them to get a lot of offensive rebounds. You can expect them to bully you in specific matchups, like driving to the rim through thinner, smaller defenders or posting up thinner, smaller defenders. Like that's part of the deal, right? Like that's going to happen. You can expect to face stiff rim opposition, right? Like you can expect when you're attacking the basket against this team and they're big, that you're going to have to deal with a lot of big bodies around the basket. Those are all the trade-offs, right? But the flip side of that is you have a massive skill advantage, a massive foot speed advantage and quickness, and you have a massive straight line drive speed advantage, like sprinting up and down the floor. You have advantages on the floor. And so what it becomes is what wins? Is it the big team that's being more physically imposing and winning all those altercations and containing all of the small ball things that you do? Because if that's the case, you'll lose to the big team. I personally am a big believer in that small ball style, but it has to be played well. And in that first half, especially through the first 3 quarters, really, Golden State just wasn't playing well. They were losing those physical altercations all over the floor. They were struggling in individual matchups. Jaren Jackson Jr., kudos to him. He figured out about halfway through that game that Otto Porter Jr. just could not keep him from getting to the basket. And he just started ripping through and going to the rim, and he was getting whatever he wanted. And again, that's always been Jaren Jackson's game, is that bully ball game. And I don't know what took him so long to understand that was his biggest advantage in this series. But tonight, he got that figured out, and he was attacking the basket. But again, Memphis was winning the style fight. There were 2 different styles on the floor, and they were playing better. But as the game progressed, Golden State, I thought Tim Legler did a really nice job breaking this down with JJ Redick on their podcast that they did the other day. And they were talking about how, Golden State has a tendency to get out of what makes them very good. This is what happened in the 2018 playoffs, if you guys remember, against Houston. And it was credit to Houston. They did it by switching everything and kind of throwing off all of the split cuts and off-ball actions and on-ball actions that Golden State runs. But they got ISO heavy. And KD and Steph both kind of fell into it in that series, and they got out of whack. Their ball movement stopped, and it became a matchup attacking series. And James Harden and Chris Paul were having as much success attacking matchups as Steph and KD were. And one of the biggest indicators, obviously Chris Paul went out and it took that kind of question out of the equation. But had Chris Paul stayed healthy, that series would have come down to, could Golden State have gotten back into their style of basketball? Golden State style basketball is movement. It's multiple passes on every possession. It's multiple getting your defense in a ton of rotations. Because as we always talked about, especially against elite defenses, they'll communicate well on the first action. They might communicate well and engage on the second action. But that third action, that fourth action, that's when you start having guys have tougher responsibilities, more difficult, communication type of situations, and they botch stuff. And then you start to get open shots, especially against a young team like this Memphis team. But they go through these extended stretches sometimes where they forget that. They did back in 2018 in the playoffs, and they did it a little bit tonight. And all of a sudden it was like early shots, quick in the possession. All of a sudden it was like transition pull-up threes. All of a sudden it's difficult shot make. And, some of it is like Steph, I've never seen Steph miss that many wide open shots. Like some of it but that gets in your head then, right? And then you start forcing things even more. You start to feel like it's not your night, especially for guys like Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole. You saw a lot of that. But to their credit, they reined it in and they got it together in that fourth quarter and they got going. It was a really, really weird game. I don't know how you could say it translates forward because, again, it's the small sample size is the advantage of the weird team, right? Like, obviously, if Philly played a 7-game series against Miami with no bigs, by game 3 or game 4, Eric Spoelstra is going to figure out ways to consistently exploit you for not having any size on the floor, right? But in that first game or two, you have your advantage. This was the game, if you were Memphis, you had to win because you made things super weird. If you win this game, maybe you can eke out one more of those in your buzzsaw in front of your home crowd. But at the longer this goes, they're going to have a lot of time over the course of the next couple of days to dig into the film, see where their areas of opportunity were. There's no way in the world that Memphis should get away with having Steven Adams on the floor for more than half the game against your 5-out attack. It just shouldn't happen. So Golden State's got a lot of stuff that they got to figure out. But they're all readily available adjustments. And again, this is game 5. They should have a much better opportunity to make Memphis pay for being as big and as slow as they were. A couple of quick shout outs. I just talked about Jaren Jackson. I thought he had a monstrous two-way performance. Just, that guy's young and he doesn't see the floor super well. And it's going to be hard for him to be as impactful as he's capable of and consistently enough at this phase in his career. But he's going to be really good. Because, man, there was a moment there in that game where he just suddenly, it dawned on him that no one could guard him. And he was just going to the rim every time and just quick little rip-throughs and stuff and just, getting the defender on his hip and then making shots off the glass. He had an extremely tough left-handed layup off the glass there in crunch time. Just an unbelievable performance. And then credit to Tyus Jones. I remember when Tyus Jones was coming out of college, he was kind of, portrayed as the prototypical point guard, like the guy that is just the guy who can run a team, which is not a thing that you see too often in the NBA these days because most guards are high pick and roll heavy, really mechanical decision makers. If it gets caught on the screen, I'm shooting. If he's kind of caught on the screen but still there, I'm going to drive into the lane further. If I'm going to get into my floater, I'm going to get to my pull-up shot, or I'm going to get all the way to the rim. And if someone absolutely forces me to, then I'll give the ball up. That's the way most guards are wired in the NBA these days. There just aren't many guys like Tyus Jones who can just execute and run a team. And he did a really nice job of that tonight. So credit to him. But good comeback win from Golden State. Like I said, Steph in the fourth quarter was incredible. I thought Kevin Looney came in and gave some really important minutes. There was a monster play from Jordan Poole after a defensive stop where he whipped that behind the back dribble and actually threw it way out in front of him and chased it down and got all the way to the rim for the layup in transition. That's that freak of nature straight line speed that Jordan Poole has. That was so good. Draymond Green had a monster block on Jaren Jackson Jr. on one of the final possessions where Jaren Jackson kind of forced a pull-up 3 off the dribble and he blocked it. Klay Thompson had a big defensive play towards the end of the game on Desmond Bane. So for a team that had a lot of guys that had rough nights, Otto Porter Jr. struggled guarding Jaren Jackson Jr., but he was the only guy making shots. Andrew Wiggins had a massive block on Desmond Bane going down the lane. So everyone had a rough night in a Golden State jersey, but everybody came through and made the big plays. And that's what the championship teams do. And I mean, again, my concerns with Golden State remain the same that they've been this entire playoff run. Like, because they're up 3-1 now. They're probably going to win this series, probably going to go to the next round. They're going to face someone like Phoenix or Dallas, right? But consistently in this series, they've struggled a little bit with Memphis's size. So that's going to be their big flaw. But every team has flaws. Dallas's flaw is after Luka, the offensive creation is super inconsistent. And they don't have great defensive personnel, although they've been guarding super well. Phoenix's biggest flaw, as you've seen, is when they play against a good dribble drive team like Dallas is, all of a sudden, like Chris Paul starts to struggle a little bit. Guys like Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson start to struggle a bit. Devin Booker is really the only guy who's been good on the road in Dallas. So you're seeing Phoenix is showing some limitations in shot creation against really good defensive teams, which is exactly what happened to them in the NBA Finals against Milwaukee. Boston, we're going to talk about them here in just a minute. Their offense goes through these extended stretches where they're sloppy. So all of these teams have flaws. So I'm not trying to act like Golden State's the only team with the flaw. It's just this is their specific flaw. When they play teams that are very big and physical, it can cause them some issues. Tonight they were able to overcome it. I thought that was a big step for them. Obviously, that'll be the matchups are the things that determine these types of outcomes, and we'll see what happens when they move further along. But 3-1 in this series, the only team in the second round that has a 3-1 lead right now is Golden State.